Hello and welcome to the Computer Workshop. I'm your host, Steve Reeves, filling in for Dean Crutchfield. Our show today is the first half of a two-part series designed to help you look good in print. Looking good in print means turning an ordinary memo, letter, or resume into the product that holds your attention and looks good to the reader. Today we'll take an in-depth look at how to create and publish these eye-catching documents. But before we get started, I want you to know this is a live show. During the program, you can call in with your questions, comments, and tips about today's topic. Our phone number in Houston is 749-8345. If you're outside the 713 area code, the number is 1-800-364-8200. Our first guest today is Sandra Duvall, Coordinator of Desktop Publishing at College of the Mainland in Texas City. Also joining us is Perry Jackson, Senior Art Director at Johnstone, George, and Breslau here in Houston. Sandra and Perry, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And I made it through the title of your company, too. I didn't even...
Very good.
It's great. Probably what to do before we get started is tell our viewers a little bit what we're going to talk about today. I know we've got all kinds of things to talk about, all kinds of things we want to make sure people know how to look good in print. First thing I know we are going to show PageMaker 5.0, which is hot off the press, brand new. They just started shipping like Tuesday or Wednesday. So we'd like to keep our viewers on the cutting edge of what's going on here. So other things we're going to talk about Quark Express. That's what you use, Perry.
Right.
And a little bit about Word for Windows. Not necessarily Word for Windows specific, but how it varies and how it differs from desktop publishing, word processing, and desktop publishing. We're going to talk about fonts, how they're available, on what medias, cartridges and things like that, and when to use them, when not to use them, do's and don'ts. We're going to talk a lot about do's and don'ts today, good and bad examples and all kinds of things. Also magazines. We have a bunch of magazines and books to talk about how to find out tips and things about how to make things look good in print. Because a lot of times, if you can't go to a class or something, or like you teach at College of the Mainland, you can get some tips and tricks out of a lot of these magazines and newsletters and things. And then also, one thing that we're going to start off with is good and bad examples. Not necessarily good and bad, but standard, non-standard, and how people would set things up. I guess what we ought to do right in the beginning here is show some of these examples, like before and after. We've got these saved on slides already. So what we want to do is, the first one we want to do is a newsletter. Sandra, why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe why this is, maybe not standard, or how it differs from, or how you would change it, like the before picture.
The first problem we had to go back to is the body copy was too heavy, and that in itself created more problems. It made it more difficult to work with the headline. We couldn't seem to make the headline heavy enough. And there are several things, like there's some vertical lettering on it. Vertical lettering is very hard to read. We usually try to avoid it as designers. And the kerning on the masthead is a little bit tight. And you don't know what to look at first. There's three really strong elements up there, and all of them have about the same weight and strength at the top.
You mentioned kerning. What is kerning?
It's how tight those letters are together. The white space between them is what we look at.
And there seems to be a lot of, when I read these books and things, there seems to be a lot of technical type words. Technical to me, desktop publishing, because I don't use desktop publishing every day. There's a lot of things. So if I ask you during the show to explain some words, just so our viewers know exactly what's going on. I guess then what we got to do in the next one, we have our second slide, which is our after slide. And it's not necessarily better, a lot better. It's just something that it's more to the standard. Perry, why don't you go and talk a little about how this differs from the before?
Okay, this one is much easier to read. For one thing, the page is better organized. There's more white space, which gives the eye a little bit of visual rest. Makes it easier to read, and your eye can flow from the masthead is what you see first, and then you see the headline, and then the body copy. So there's like a hierarchy of levels of information. And it's organized in such a way that you can flow through it from one level to the next easier. The typeface is a serif typeface for the body copy, which makes it easier to read. It's also flush left in the columns, flush left and rag right, rather than justified, which is lined up on the left and the right.
All right. Rag right means it's not lined up straight, right? It's
right. Exactly. It's the line length, the line spacing is the same, and the letter spacing is the same on every line in this version, where on the other one it's justified type, so that makes the each line length is the same, but the letter spacing varies from one line to the next.
All right.
And it causes words to not read as well because there's too much space between the letters, things like that.
All right. Well, that sort of ties into my first question, is why is it important to look good in print? I mean, Sandra, why don't you go ahead and start, what is important about this whole, what this show is all about? Why is it it is important?
The most important reason to me, and I'm from the printing and publishing market, is that it be readable. And the second thing is that it look good. And readable has to do not just with where the type is, but the white space around it. He mentioned the white space, and I mentioned it in kerning. And that's something people who are new at designing don't see, the importance of that white space. And it also just makes it repeatable, too. Whenever if you design something with a good foundation and you design a similar piece of printed material, then you've got a foundation that you can use again, even though the job may look different. So you don't have to work as hard.
Oh, okay, that's great. Now, Perry, you're not just the opposite. You the same identical thing, but just flipped around, right?
Right. From my perspective, the job can't just be readable. It has to look good, too. It has to be presented in a very professional manner because I do, more high-end publications, brochures and annual reports, that sort of thing. And so you have to have a combination of readability and looking good.
All right. And before we go any further, probably what I ought to do is, you work for Johnstone, George, and Breslau.
Right.
What exactly do they do there?
We're an advertising agency. We do print advertising and capabilities brochures for corporations. We do corporate identity programs, logos, logotypes, pretty much the full range of service for print media.
All right, so you're more commercial type.
Yes.
Where Sandra, why don't you tell, you actually teach or instruct, I guess your title is coordinator of desktop publishing at College of the Mainland, but you teach more mechanical type things, right?
And my market used to be paste up and typesetting. So we came from the typography end of it. And sometimes a shop were small like Perry had, this particular market would do the typesetting for him.
Oh, I see.
But basically, it separates up with levels of design. My group of people have always done what I call level 1 and 2 design. Perry's group has always done level 2 and 3 design.
All right, and what does that mean by level? By dollar amounts, or what? You gave me a great explanation of it earlier. Why don't you go ahead and say that?
It's kind of like when you started your company. You probably quit work and Kay had to pay for everything, and you were working out of your house, but you still needed a business package, and so you probably paid for a $5 design for each one of them. And then you got so big she couldn't stand any longer. You had to go get a storefront. And so you wanted a better looking business package, and it was like a $50 a piece package. And then when you get real famous and rich, you want something so that your big customers will know that you are prestigious, and you can get it from Perry's kind of company.
All right, and that's where you take it and make the wild, great looking corporate brochure and do the annual reports, because when you're small you really don't do an annual report.
Right.
You don't really need one, I guess.
Yeah,
exactly.
All right. I think what to do is, some of the things, I wrote down a bunch of different questions and things. One of the first things that I always think about when I start a new document, or actually maybe I don't think about it, is what do you think about before you should start typing? You don't just start typing a newsletter. You actually have to think about things like text fonts and different things like that. What's the best way? Is there some shortcuts, or is there well, I guess what we could do, you want to just go ahead and start showing PageMaker? Why don't we show PageMaker 5 and some of the things that it can do, and some of the additions, and how to set things up like style sheets and whatever. We don't necessarily have to show style sheets on top of, on PageMaker. Why don't we go ahead and start showing PageMaker 5.0 just so people can see what's new in this new program. So we want to bring, it's already loaded up, it's already ready to go. This is PageMaker 5.0, just released. I guess it's both for the PC and the Mac, right? Is that? The
PC release is coming out in 30 days from the release of a Mac version.
Oh, okay.
And it will be not only across platforms like it has been, but the shortcuts are supposed to also be the same. So.
Oh, great. Well, you made up a little tutorial, not a tutorial, but a presentation little thing here. I mean, presentation. We can go in here and why don't you go ahead and start talking about what...
Their information says they have 100 changes, and so I picked my favorite ones that I like, and one of them has to do with cross-platform. It's called Panoose, and what they're helping with is I do a lot of cross-platform moving jobs from home to school, and the fonts don't come with it. They don't move. In other words, I have to reformat the fonts because they're different. And what they're going to try to do is bridge this. Super Adobe Type Manager is doing it to the printer. But the nice thing about PageMaker doing it in the package is that means I can choose a font at work on the Mac that I want it to change to. And then I will have a little bit more control over fonts, and I always like anytime I have more control with the package.
Panus, I guess that's some new word they made up, or is that something that's been-
never heard of it before, so it's their new word, yeah.
I thought it was the uncle on the Danny Thomas show. Wasn't his name Panus?
I think, well, it's probably
Tanous, that's what
somebody else's uncle. Additions is not new in the fact that they've had it before, but it's much longer.
Oh,
And
I
it-
see.
And it comes in the package.
What are some of these? You've got he actually pulls it down. And,
Some of my favorite ones are building booklet, and they've got a numbering one, so that if you select it, it'll automatically number a whole group of material, and it makes me mad when I have to think of what was it. Last one was 9, the next one is what, 10, if I turn the page,
Right.
and it's going to number automatically.
oh, that's great.
But I like having them in the program because I don't want to, if I want to use one, I want it now, and it's right there. I don't
Oh.
have to wait and go to a third party. I don't have to find out if they have it or not. And the fact that I have it available, I'll be more aware of which ones they have. So
Oh, that's great.
that was why that was my second favorite addition.
All right. Then the mouse on this machine is really fast.
Yeah. There's a wonderful editing technique. Most commercial artists absolutely demand that their designers spell everything right now before it ever goes to a proofreader. Used to, the proofreader caught a lot of them. But what we had to do, if things were in different text blocks, we had to go into edit each time for each text block and each page. And editing now, it'll go through all the text blocks at one time. So you can go ahead and type and make as many mistakes as you normally do, and then edit the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
And that's a lot faster for us people who don't spell very well.
Oh, okay.
Let's see, the printing,
Non-consecutive pages.
that means that like you go to a service bureau and you want only postscript page 579, you can choose them, and it'll, instead of having to reopen the program every time, otherwise you have to go and file print and then say just this particular page. So we'll print the non-consecutive pages. And the other thing that it does, I don't know if I can read that. Oh, the fact that it prints in the background. So
Oh, okay,
you can
great.
so you can have it. So you can say print all of these documents. It will have saved the print information on all of them, and then it'll print them all at the same time in the background.
Oh, great.
Before you had to go back in and change the printing requirements each time on each one of them.
So they've changed this quite a bit to make it easier. Is
Yeah.
what a lot of the new features are ease of use features.
And more, yes, and more productive.
Right.
You can work a little bit faster in it. This one is the one that Perry and I are the most excited about. And first of all, it's the precision. Like when I bring in a logo, if I bring it into a letterhead, I automatically want to reduce it 50% if I do it to the correct size. On the business card, I want to automatically reduce it 25, and I can bring it in and reduce them exactly
Oh, great.
with the precision. And they've had it before, but they've added a lot of things to it. Let me pull it down for you. There's a lot more things in that control
Oh, that's
palette.
something completely new in the new
Yes,
version.
and there's they had a little
the
bit of
text
it.
fonts
And you can not only move things at 90-degree angles, you can move them at various angles, graphics as well as type. But this one right here is what's wonderful, is the fact that
Yeah, because I know that I do a newsletter every month, and on the back page I fold it over, so I always had to, you couldn't type upside down. You actually had to feed it through your Xerox machine and then put it in the other way and then send that to the printer because you couldn't type upside down. So you had to kind of do it yourself. Now you can type at like 180 degrees?
are 27 degrees,
Oh,
so
great.
you have control over that, and you can skew in it also. I can't remember.
And
what-
that's also the thing on the bottom. That makes it a lot easier because I was always pulling down the menus to change the text font and change the size and change the underline and bold. You can do it from the bottom now. That makes it a lot easier.
This line and fill is what allows us to build traps,
All right.
and that is real powerful for the high end of my market and for Perry's market completely.
All right. Now you can turn that off. Okay.
Okay, that's my favorite ones.
Okay. And what's 7 and 8? Are there more things? Do you have more?
That was
pages?
just some rules I put on there that I.
Okay. Now let's go back. I want to make sure people know how you both of you stand. Also, you use Macintoshes,
Right.
Quark Express, and we might want to also talk about the. You said you used to use PageMaker?
Right. I learned the Macintosh and page layout using PageMaker several years ago, and I used that for a long time, and it seemed easier because it was the one I knew better. But once I started going to more high-end needs to be able to go directly to a printer and have them output film in 4-color separations with traps and all of that kind of information. PageMaker didn't have the capabilities to do that, so I switched to Quark Express, which has the features that this new PageMaker looks like it has now. So I've heard a lot of people talking about the differences between Quark Express and the new PageMaker now, and basically I've heard that if you're using Quark now, there's really no need to switch to PageMaker, but if you're using PageMaker and we're thinking about switching to Quark, now you don't really have to, because PageMaker has sort of come up to the level of Quark Express.
Okay. And now you teach PageMaker, but do you also use do you teach other programs or just PageMaker? Or?
Well, to really do desktop publishing, you need lots of programs. We have 19 programs loaded in our Quark Express lab, which is our Quadra lab, which is our high-end lab. And we have probably 9 programs loaded just in our basic lab. So, all that is an assembling program. You really have to have a good drawing program. Now you don't need a word processing program, but some people like to bring copy in so that other people can be doing your typing. And then you need all the programs to make the type look good, the Adobe Type Manager and those kinds of programs. So we end up having to teach a pretty big genre of programs.
Oh, okay. What we got to do, we've got phone callers. Let's take some questions here. See if we can handle some of these questions here. First question, Frank from Spring. Do you have a question?
Yes. We just got WordPerfect for Windows 5.2 and thought it was supposed to be True WYSIWYG, but twice now we've tried to print out something and it hasn't looked the same on paper as it has on the screen.
All right. Well, that's actually one of my questions is going to be, what's the difference between desktop publishing and word processing? That's probably almost like your question. I mean, why? Because, for example, I use Word and I use PageMaker, but sometimes I really don't need PageMaker to do it, but sometimes it's a lot easier to just do it on Word. But a lot of these new word processors are pushing themselves as desktop, what do they call them, like desktop publishing word processors. It's not always true, though, is it? Because, what are the difference? Why would somebody, rather than having WordPerfect, would rather have PageMaker or Quark Express or something? Is it because of the features, or what are the features in a desktop publisher that are better than a word processor?
A lot of the features are different. You have a lot more control and
like text and columns.
Text and columns, right? Columns is a big feature and tabular matters. The ability to bring in graphics and to print those out. I'm not sure what the
WordPerfect for Windows. I don't think. Do you know much about WordPerfect for Windows, or?
I really don't.
Well,
know
he's
Word
really
programs.
talking about fonts, and if
Screen
I understand
fonts.
his question correctly, that he's got a WYSIWYG image on his screen. And that has to not do with that program. It has to do with having Adobe Type Manager and Type Reunion loaded. Or those screen interpretations of the fonts won't look this good if it can't have the printer font information to translate it and put it on the screen. So you really have two things to load: a printer font and a screen font. I think now they're calling them bitmap and I don't know what the other new word is, but they just changed it on me recently.
But it's not necessarily true that what you see on the screen is what you're going to get on in your printer.
Yeah, because the second part of that is if he doesn't have the printer fonts available to him, either on his computer or in his printer, he's not going to get them.
All right.
So he either has a printer that doesn't have those particular fonts available, or has such a small memory it can't go back to his computer and find that information to draw that image. It's really like drawing an image with a drawing tool, like here he draws a shape. Well, someone has drawn the shapes of those letters that go on the printer, and you have to have both the screen and the printer
All right.
font.
Does that answer your question, Frank?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we kind of roundabout way there. We kind of answered your question. Okay, thanks for calling. We have another call here. Leon from Houston, do you have a question?
Yeah, I sure do. Oftentimes I'm called upon at my job to, make publications and things like that. And what I was wondering is, since I have not been trained to, use desktop publishing, are there any books available that you guys know of that I could purchase to help me?
Actually, there's quite a few of them. I brought a couple of them today. What do you suggest first? We have these that you brought. These aren't necessarily desktop publishing books, but these are standards books. But are there books that you know of that are out there, like at Bookstop and places like that?
I think the whole thing,
Things that would give me like tips and tricks, that kind of deal.
I think the whole thing seems just overwhelming to everybody. I think first of all, you've got to sort out what kind of printed material it is. You've got to start putting these pieces of printed material into groups, and there's really 5 groups of printed material. Basically, business packages, long documents, advertising, newsletters, and forms or listings. Then once you know which group it goes into, you need to find a book that deals with that group or has the style information that can give you the foundation to work in it. This one right here is a good foundation for newsletters. That one, but that doesn't mean it'll work for flyers. What you learn about in that one will not work for flyers. And that's scary to people. They you know, when you work as a typist, you have 1, 2 typefaces or 3 in 2 sizes and 3 leading choices. And here you have so many choices it confuses you. So the first step is to think about what category of printed material, and then find a book that talks very specifically about that grouping.
All right.
Okay.
All right. And then we also have other books. I mean, I just brought a couple examples. I have one here that's called No Sweat Desktop Publishing. It's more a generic book, but it does go through and show different examples of, you know, lining up, you know, the text. We'll talk more about text fonts and things, and how to get started, and how to look good in print. And then there's also specific books on specific programs like PageMaker. Now, this is PageMaker 4.0, the older version. I don't think there's many books out yet on PageMaker 5.0 because this just came out. But there are books. I've seen them at Bookstop and places like that, on Quark Express, tips and tricks. Some that even come with discs that come with examples of forms and invoices and all kinds of different. As a matter of fact, I just happen to have one right here. One that's called Winning Forms for Word for Windows, but they have the same one for PageMaker and one for WordPerfect for Windows, and this comes with a disc that has all these examples set up as templates.
Oh, that's
so that you can just go in there and then just fill it in and change it, so that you know, hopefully these are looking good in print before we start, before you change everything.
I have 3 favorite authors too. One is John White. He's kind of high end, but people can still understand him. Ole Kavern, excellent author, and Robin Williams is another author I think that shows a lot of good before and after. Robin Williams is a good one to start with if you're trying to learn to do some good designs.
He's pretty funny too.
Yes, and John White does makes a lot of little handwritten notes on his books and explains to you why things are not good. Like he'll show you 100 ways to begin a paragraph.
We'll get those
on 2
names
pages.
and write them down so that if anybody after the show wants to know what they are, we could put them on the bulletin board or call in if they want to know who those authors are. Any other questions, Leanne?
No, that just about covers it.
Okay, great. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
We have another caller here. We have Sue from Houston. Do you have a question?
Yes, I just recently graduated from college, and I was wondering if it would be appropriate to use a logo on your resume. And if so, what size? And should a resume also be only 1 page in length?
What do you think?
Not necessarily. I get a lot of resumes from students right out of school, and I think a logo is a good idea if it's a good logo, which just you should probably know that, whether it's good or bad. Hopefully it's a good one. The size of it, again, depends. You could use it as your letterhead. If it's a logo for you personally, use that as the letterhead logo and have your resume on that letterhead. That could be a way to look very professional with it. As far as keeping it to 1 page, I don't think that's really important. It's more important, I think, to keep it easy to read and well organized so that you can, whoever you're sending it to, can get the information that they need very quickly. Because I know people don't really spend a lot of time looking over resumes that they receive in the mail unsolicited. So keep it concise, but if you need more than 1 page, I don't think that's a problem.
Do you have any comments on that?
I teach my students to develop a word mark with their initials because they're trying to get jobs as desktop publishing specialists. So if you're a designer, you know, then your resume should not look like somebody trying to get a job as an accountant.
Exactly.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And did you say about the how many pages? Does it make any difference? I don't know if it...
I don't think that's real important. You don't want to have too much information.
Probably don't have a whole lot of
If you
information
need 2
straight
pages,
out of school.
right. But if you need 2 pages, then I don't think that's a problem.
One of
All
my
right.
favorite ones a student did was 11 by 17, fold it in half. And it was a beautiful design, typographically well done, and I just gave away her technique now.
Oh,
It's very,
great. Well,
very unique, but very,
Well,
very
that's what this
nice.
shows, information, educational on looking good in print. It's perfect. Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll take another caller here. We have Robert from Houston. Do you have a question? Hello, Robert?
Yes,
Do you have a question?
yes, I have Ventura Publisher 4.1, Word for Windows 3.1, and Word for Windows 2.0C, and Microsoft Publisher for quick and dirty
All right.
jobs. And I was interested in the remark about justified text. It obviously makes different spaces between the letters and different spaces between words on different lines. How can you avoid that? How can you justify and still keep smart spacing?
You can't really avoid that happening, but some line lengths, if you have a wider line length, you don't have as much of a spacing problem, but you don't want to get too wide because then it's hard to read for that reason.
Right.
I guess it's kind of a personal preference for me that I prefer using the flush left copy rather than justified. Although I have used justified text in some annual reports and capabilities brochures, and when I do that, I generally have a longer line length and wider line spacing so that the lines are farther apart, and it makes it easier, sort of compensates for the long line length that way, making it easier to read.
All right, does that answer your question?
Well, I can't always have long lines.
Then change to a smaller type size.
That's a good
All right.
Your standard for type size for body copy is really 8 to 11 point type, not 12 like PageMaker defaults. I cannot believe they default body copy at 12. I never use it.
It's huge.
And the other thing is the reason the gaps bother us is our eyes fall into those holes. So if you increase the leading between the lines, then the holes between the lines are bigger than those spacing, and your eyes can make it. So those are the two things that will make it work.
All right.
Sometimes you can letter space the letters out a little bit to make it look a little nicer.
All right. Robert, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for calling.
Great, I appreciate your help.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We're going to have to take a quick break here. We're going to take, it's just about a minute and a half, and we're going to show our art gallery. And I want to make sure people know that they can send us their art, and we'll put it on the air on the following show, the next week's show, whenever we can fit it in. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. In case you just tuned in, this is the Computer Workshop. My name is Steve Reeves, and I'm the host. I'm sitting in for Dean Crutchfield today, and we have two guests. We've got Perry Jackson from, I have to look down here because it is a mouthful. It sounds more like a law firm to me, but it's Johnston, George, and Breslau. And we have Sandra Duvall from College of the Mainland down in Texas City. We've been talking, our subject tonight is looking good in print. And actually it's not tonight, it's this afternoon, but just pretend I didn't say that, all right? And we've been talking about all kinds of things. We're talking about PageMaker 5.0, hot off the press, talking about differences between desktop publishing and word processing. We're talking about all kinds of different things, everything from soup to nuts when it comes to looking good in print. I guess what we ought to start off with on this section of the show, the second half, we've already got more phone calls too, but let's lead into a little bit, talk a little bit about, maybe about fonts. Why don't we talk about a little about fonts? We just touched them on a little bit, but what they're available on, and maybe some do's and don'ts about fonts. I know I've got some examples here. They both started laughing when I said do's and don'ts. There must be a lot of big do's and don'ts. I know that fonts are available on cartridge, and they're available on disk. I guess they call these soft fonts, right? Soft fonts or downloadable fonts or whatever when they're on disk. And they're also available on CD. I don't want to make a reflection on the screen here. CD, and they can have hundreds of fonts on here. And then there's also some that are available on the printers. By the way, we do have a printer back here. I don't know if we're even going to really need it on this show, but it's a Hewlett-Packard 4M, which is their PostScript laser, which has an interface for both the PC like we have here or the Apple for using it as a PostScript laser. But are there some things? We have some examples here of fonts. Why don't we talk a little bit about the different types of fonts? I can hold these up here. I don't know if they can see this here. The first one, what is this? Just regular font, right? Regular font, and this is a bold. I'm just trying to, just so we can know what the different things are.
Well, first of all, they're all sans serif, and they're probably Helvetica.
Probably the first three.
Right.
Yeah.
What's sans serif and serif? What's the difference between serif and sans serif?
Well, the sans serif doesn't have any little feet sitting on the bottom of it.
Right.
It's a very modern typeface, and it has on the page it looks very crisp and sharp and gives a more modern look to your jobs.
Oh, I see.
The bad thing about Helvetica in printers, though, is it comes off of a 300 DPI printer very heavy, and to use Helvetica's body copy, I don't know if you find this, Perry. I find that it's just so bold. I have to almost go to Helvetica Light to get a decent look on the page. It makes a problem.
And then the next sheet of fonts. Now these also are different types of fonts. I call them fun fonts, but like the top one is just like you call, what do you call?
Those are decorative.
Decorative
Those are all
fonts.
decorative.
I knew there was a word for them. And then this little snow on it. We should have one little umbrellas on it for today. I can hear it raining out there right now. And then these are wingdings, I guess is what they're called down here. And then the last one is the same thing, but underlined. Now, this is what you're talking about.
That's a serif,
serif font.
The second one is.
And I don't know, this looks more like a typewriter font almost. All right, but I just wanted to make sure people knew the difference between serif and sans serif, not non-serif. Sans serif and bold, italic, and all those different things that have to do with fonts. We've got some more phone calls. Let's take some more phone calls here. We have Jeff from Houston. Do you have a question?
Yes, good afternoon, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Listen, I have a question regarding the platforms, and I've noticed that the PC on your set there happens to be a PC, and I happen to be one of those designers out there that's plowing through on the PC-based system. But I noticed that there are a great deal of programs coming on that happen to be cross-platform capable. And I was wondering if the panel could field to let us know how they feel about how this is going to help the industry or what it's going to do to the industry. And I'll go ahead and hang up and let you guys have at it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I work exclusively on the Macintosh, and I've just have no experience at all with PC, so I don't know much about.
But do you ever transfer drawings or anything with anybody, or trade drawings? With anybody?
I do occasionally
the
have
actual documents.
Well, I occasionally get like text fonts copy from clients if they have a manuscript already written and it comes from their PC. I do convert that text from the PC format to the Macintosh format and import it into my Quark Express or PageMaker documents.
Okay, but there are problems. What you were saying earlier about text fonts going back and forth, but hopefully that'll be changed in a lot of these Panus sort of things. Is that what it's called, Panus? Well, you have experience on both platforms, and how do they transfer and how do they work? Is that, I mean, are there many problems with that? I mean, you have students that use PCs at home and Macs at school and whatever?
I'm getting more and more students that are coming in with PCs at home, just because they're a little less expensive still at this point to buy. And then a lot of companies will have one just because they already had a PC performing another task, and therefore it didn't make any sense to buy a different brand of computer. So a lot of the office worker kinds of people are using PCs. The difference is you just cannot draw as well with this mouse. You cannot, and that's the simplicity of it. Microsoft Windows has made a big change in terms of the programs just thinking the way someone thinks when they're designing pages. So I don't mind a PC as much, thank goodness, because I have a husband that is a PC guy.
All right. Okay, we have some more callers here. I'm not sure. This is line, I'm going to take line 1 here because I'm not quite sure how that. Mary from Houston, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I've worked with Lotus, Always, Freelance, WordPerfect. I'm wondering about drawing, the art text, borders, these advantages, and can I view my pages before I print them?
All right, is there a preview print on the new PageMaker? I don't know if there is. Like on Word, I know there is. On Word for Windows, it allows you to look at what it's going to look like on the screen before you print it out. I usually do that a lot. Is it? I mean, so you can see how it is on the sheet. Sometimes, I mean, it's pretty much the way it is. It's what you see is what you get on.
But those other programs that you mentioned, I don't know about
Yeah,
them.
I don't know all those programs.
The spreadsheet program that I'm using is FileMaker Pro rather than Excel, and it's only because it looks more like I can use it like a design package a little bit more. It matches my market better.
What about you? Do you have a monitor that looks like a sheet, or do you have a regular monitor?
I have like a 19-inch color
19-inch,
monitor.
so actually what you
what I
see
see on the screen is what
exactly
I get.
what
Right.
you get. I've seen those monitors before that look like a sheet of paper. They're almost like 8.5 by 11. They're long ways instead
Exactly.
of flat, like a regular monitor.
Right.
So it looks just like a sheet, and you can actually turn them too, so that if you're doing something horizontally, or what they call it, landscape,
right.
as opposed to portrait,
Portrait or
it
landscape.
makes it a little bit different there. All right. I'm not sure if we could really answer the question. I mean, it's. Does that answer your question in any way, or do we?
That's what I was asking. Like in some programs, you can view the page, actually how it's centered and how it looks exactly before you print it. That's
Right.
what I wanted to know.
Well, a lot of these programs allow you what you see is what you get.
Yeah, all page layout programs do that because they are an assembler program, and so you have
Right.
to be able to see it.
Okay. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Scott from Webster, do you have a question? Scott? I guess Scott didn't have a question. Crawford?
Yes.
Do you have a question?
I sure do. I'm interested in loading a second hard drive or partition with what they call Sunsoft Interactive, which is a Unix for Intel on my hard drive. And I was wondering what kind of desktop publishing. I think it would run fine, but I was just curious if you know anything about running it on this kind of environment.
Well, I know about Suns, and I know if it's the same way on the DOS level of the Unix platform for Sun, like the Interactive or the new Solaris operating system.
Right.
Probably the most common desktop publisher is Frame or FrameMaker. Is it
Right.
FrameMaker?
I'm very familiar with Frame.
And that's pretty much the only one that I know of that works on the Sun platform. I don't know. I don't think Quark Express or anything else. I think Frame's that's the only one that I know of.
Is that right? And do you know anything about these Unix for Intels? Tell me about that. Share a little information on that if you could.
Well, I know we're going to do a show later specifically on Unix. So you may want to wait and watch that show. It's I'm trying to keep this all just desktop publishing and looking good in print.
I got you. I got you.
And also,
Frame's the way to go then.
No, well, we've got all kinds of questions, but that's a good thing. I'm going to keep that on our hotline, or call our bulletin board and leave a comment to make sure we do a show on Unix.
Right.
I know that's,
well, like I'm saying, it's more like Unix for Intel
Right.
that I'm interested in because I'm kind of PC based.
Right.
And everything's going towards this risk, and that's what I'm more interested in.
It seems to be a hot subject right now.
I got you.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
Enjoy your show.
Oh, great. Watch it every week.
Great.
Robert, do you have a question? No. Milt. Hello?
Hello.
Who is this Milton?
Milton.
Okay, sorry. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yes. I'm an amateur. I use the computer just for my own pleasure, write letters and things like that. I have an Okidata 400, and I don't know what it means when you talk about PostScript and TrueType and things like that. The fonts that are built in on the computer, I don't know how to really call them up or use the fonts in Microsoft or WordPerfect and so on. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
All right. What are the differences between like PostScript fonts and TrueType fonts? I mean, is there an advantage using one over the other, or I mean, I know like a PostScript laser, the fonts are built in to the laser and it prints out a lot faster.
What PostScript means, and it's supposed to be a big secret, the whole story, but what it really sort of means is that if you had the letter H, that it makes both stems of that letter the same width, so the type doesn't have a blotchy look to it, and it also adjusts the spacing between letters, so it makes it look better. And there was a second half of his question.
Well, like TrueType, and what's the major difference between the different things? Like I know in Windows they use TrueType fonts, which I know used to use Adobe fonts, and they had to read everything in. It was a lot slower printing things out. With TrueType fonts, I guess TrueType fonts actually started on the Mac. I'm pretty sure that TrueTypes originated on the Mac, and they're a lot faster because they're built into the program, and everything prints out a lot faster. Now that they've switched, I mean, like Windows comes with TrueType fonts.
Once you have type loaded into your computer, it works on all programs that use all types.
Right.
So it's across the programs. It's not really connected so much with each program. And I use Adobe just because it's safe. I don't want anything that's going to be a surprise.
Right.
And I use some of the other brands that have been typesetting companies forever that I know I can trust.
Adobe's pretty much
Copy
been the
graphics.
standard for
Yeah.
years, and it sort of just became, that's the way it was.
Right.
And now that when Windows 3.1 came out and they came with TrueType fonts, a lot of people that use Windows use TrueType fonts, or like for example, I have TrueType fonts, but I also have Adobe Type Manager loaded on my machine, so I actually can use either one or both. And they've made it pretty easy now, but it also makes them print out a lot faster too.
I think the most important thing someone can do who wants to make their type look good is to find the best sans serif and the best Roman face that they have, and stick to those until they feel like they've gotten real comfortable with them. We have a new term called a putzer. We use it all the time, and that's the person that has 50 fonts and tries to use them all in 1 month.
Or on the same page.
Or well, if he does one job that month, he'll use them all on the same page. So it's more important to really look at those typefaces and closely, and that's what we did with that newsletter. We made out paragraph samples of all of her Roman faces and had people look at them for readability. People who didn't know anything about readability but knew that they read. And they got to the point where it was really clear to see which of the faces were best. And from now on, she'll always use that particular Roman face. And she has 50 typefaces.
Right.
So sometimes having a lot of typefaces is more trouble than having a few good ones.
And it can do more harm than good if you don't know how to select the best font for the
Right.
job.
Yeah, and I know when I do a newsletter every month, I mentioned that earlier, but I remember some of my original newsletters, I did them all in capital letters. For some reason, I thought that looked good, but then I found myself, I couldn't even read it myself. I don't know how my customers could read it, and it looked really bad. So then I changed it, and it's a lot easier to read, and I used, again, I did all the don'ts. I had like 20,000 different typefaces, and I had, everything was italic and back and forth and bold, and it was kind of fun, but it was really hard to read. All right?
It's exciting, and so you get caught up in the excitement.
And you go out and buy these packages that have 100 fonts. You want to load every one of them up.
And use them all right
And
now.
that's another thing. It also takes up a lot of memory in your computer. So you want to load as few fonts as possible. All right? Does that answer your question?
One more question.
Okay.
How much memory should I have on my printer?
I don't know. Nowadays, it really depends on the printer.
Yeah, it depends on the type of printer.
It depends on the type, and like if you have PostScript or if you have color, or some fonts require more, but I know that most HP come with 1 meg. I'd recommend 2 in most of them. For most, I would recommend adding another megabyte. And in most PostScript, they come with 4, but I know a lot of times you want to expand it to more, like 8 or 16 megabytes to make sure you can print the whole sheet. Because a lot of times, you probably know this both, that you start printing out something and only half the page comes out because the memory's full in the printer. You don't want that to happen.
When I buy a new printer, I make sure that I can hook a hard drive up to that printer so that I can download my fonts to that hard drive. and that speeds up the whole operation.
Right. A lot of the new printers, you can actually have a hard drive in them, or a connect.
But I even connect one
a
up
hard
to-
drive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that
All right.
answers. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. Take another caller here. Dolly in Pearland, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, it's not on fonts. I am about to do a newsletter, a 6-page newsletter that will require some recipes in it. I'm prone to want to do a 2-column newsletter, though we have in the past, it's for an organization, in the past we have done a 3-column. This last newsletter, I went ahead, did a 3-column newsletter, and then put a recipe in 2 columns. You know, ran the recipe across 2 columns. So which do you all prefer overall for any newsletter, a 2-column or a 3-column newsletter?
What's my favorite? My favorite is a 2-column grid on a 2-column newsletter on a 5-column grid.
Okay.
Which is what that
Right.
good sample is. That's
Which
my
leaves-
favorite. It is the most usable. But good luck on recipes. That is the toughest thing to type because of all the fractions. And the good thing about Aldous 5.0, it has a built-in fractions. It'll build your fractions for you, and it has a recipe additions. So if you can wait till PageMaker 5.0 comes out, it'll be easy to
Should solve
do.
the problem.
Now, you told me something about the column width should be no wider than your eyes, right? Because you don't want it to go any further than that.
Now you get a crick in if you're reading a lot of copy and you have to turn your head, or if you have bifocals, you lose your concentration and you get a crick in your neck.
Or a creek. If you're from up north, it's a creek in your neck. Hard to relearn
Or a
that.
tank in your neck. Huh?
Right, exactly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it helps. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks a lot for calling.
Bye.
Scott, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry we got disconnected a little earlier.
Oh,
I hope
that's
you're
all
doing
right.
okay today. Mine refers not to fonts exactly, but to importation of graphics. I am currently dealing with AMI Pro and have access to Ventura Publishing. I'm interested in getting a hand scanner that I could it's for an intra-store mail system, so I'm trying to get a hand scanner to actually input graphics from our store onto the flyer itself. I was wondering which y'all considered easier to use with a hand scanner.
Well, I don't know. I mean, in product specific or?
In products such as Ventura Publishing, which would be easier to import a graphic from a hand scanner?
I think they're all pretty much the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
They will all accept TIFF files or PCX files or PIC files for the Mac, as long as it's specific to the. A lot of times what you can do is just look on the box. It'll tell you what kind of import file or what kind of files it can import. But I know, like, you can import just about any kind of file in PageMaker. Or Quark Express,
Right.
same thing. You can
Same
bring in
thing.
just about anything.
And Ventura is a real powerful program. It probably
Right.
imports almost
The one
all
thing
of
you
that,
need to
so-
make sure, though, is what on both hand scanners and flatbed scanners, which we will talk about next week. Now you have to watch next week's show so you can find out about this. What kind of file, you need to make sure what kind of files it will import. There are some hand scanners, some inexpensive hand scanners that have their own type files. So a lot of times you have to translate them into some other format or some other platform. So you may want to make sure that it does import. But most TIFF, PCX, PIC, RLC, there's a couple of standards out there. But most every desktop publisher, Word for Windows, all those will accept those kind of files.
Okay, I thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take another question? Sure. Barry, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's kind of a 2-part question.
All right.
I've recently been promoted to manage a pre-press department. I'm not exactly a computer literate person.
Did you get a
we run,
raise?
2 typesetters and mostly Quark Express is what we're running. And we're getting files from our customers in all sorts of different programs. And I was wondering if you had any basic suggestions when we're trying to output these files that our customers are set. Any suggestions on what we can do to help improve the process?
That market is in a turmoil right now.
Yeah, it really is.
That's not a very good answer, is it?
No.
We are right now going into pre-press, so I'm going to put in a little commercial, and we're going to offer some classes to people who are making that conversion in the fall, non-credit and credit, because that market is hurting right now. The answer is we got to all do this together. We've got to go hand in hand and figure this out. It's a big jumbled up mess. And
There's so many ways to do this, so many different programs you can use to get to the same final product that it's impossible to standardize that right now because everybody does things a different way.
Yeah, I've noticed that. You know, I have customers, and they really think they know what they're talking about, and they give us a disc, and then it's nearly impossible to run out even a portion of the file. And then when the film comes out, you know, we're missing half of it, or you know, there's always a problem with it.
To turn the question around, the real answer is to the people who are bringing you the files. If you're getting ready to design a job and it's going to have to be output right off the disk to a service bureau or to an image setter, you need to at that point go to the printer and ask them, how can I do this to make this work? Because there's some horror stories that jobs are just, the whole job is done and it's used as an FPO for position only.
Right.
But so the people out there who bring them are going to save a lot of money if they come to you first. And we say you have to design from the back forward now.
We're basically, you know, a production facility, and it's complete in-house, and we have our own RIP and everything, and we're just learning software ourselves. So we're kind of lost, you know, when they bring something in and it's just set, and, you know, it might be desktop, you know, we're running Mac, and, you know, it like you said, it is kind of a mess. And that leads into my second question was, not being extremely literate myself, what can I do to increase my odds?
You mean, well, AGFA's got a couple of good books out. The AGFA has a couple of real easy to read good books out, just little pamphlets almost. They're 8.5 by 11 that talk about color. That are real true. Everything in them is really good information. Other than that, get into a support group and that, you know, a professional group.
Yeah.
There's a couple of good ones. Adobe Technical Group is a good one right now, and there's an Association of Professional Desktop Publishers, and both of those meet in Houston, and they're wonderful. If nothing else, we cry on each other's shoulder.
Yeah, okay.
We also
Several of
need
my people are a member of HOG. I'm not real familiar with it, but I know they go to the meetings.
Right.
Is that a group you're familiar with?
That's the Apple Users Group.
Right.
Sometimes that they don't have as targeted a market. The Adobe Technical Group are very targeted to exactly the market you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, HOG just has a SIG, a special interest group on desktop publishing, word processing. They don't get into the nitty-gritty part of it. But we need to get those names and phone numbers for those associations also, so we can have those for our viewers in case anybody needs to know that.
That would be a help.
All right? Okay, thanks for calling.
Sure.
All right. All right. One thing we didn't talk about, just a few things. You said we had some comments about clip art and those kind of. What are some tips and tricks, do's and don'ts about clip art? Because I know when the first time I saw that I could get clip art in my in my documents, I just went crazy. And I had all these little discs and books and everything else. But you were saying something funny about clip art, what not to do with do's and don'ts.
What I tell my students is if you could draw it with a marks a lot and it would look better than when you go to all the trouble to scan it in, then don't put it in. And Perry's market is really nervous right now about how people are misusing drawings.
Right, because we create our own graphics and then people sort of use those as clip art sometimes, which is really
and that gets into sort of a legal sort of part of
yeah.
desktop publishing or looking good in print. All right, I think we have time for about one more caller here. Jim, do you have a question?
Yes, I want to get back to the font question. Can you give us some overall insight into when to use serif and when to use sans serif fonts, particularly as it relates to business letters or brochures that you might send out for marketing mail-outs?
I think a lot of it is personal preference, at least from my point of view. I really prefer for most text, whether it's letters or newsletters, that sort of thing, I prefer serif typeface for that because I think it's easier to read and I think it prints better on your low resolution printers. And I generally I would reserve the sans serif fonts for headlines, shorter pieces of copy, headlines or cut lines for photos, that sort of thing.
When you output to a laser printer, Helvetica just does not print well as body copy on a 300 DPI. And conversely, Roman faces do not show enough contrast between body copy and text from medium to bold. So I do exactly, if you were going to make one choice, I would do exactly what he said.
Okay. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Okay, what I want to do is I want to thank Sandra and Perry for doing the show today. And hopefully we learned a lot and taught everybody something. Next week, in part 2 of Looking Good in Print, we'll discuss printers and scanners. For Computer Workshop, I'm Steve Reeves. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
If you have any comments about Computer Workshop or would like information on donating your artwork to the Art Gallery, call our viewer comment line at 713-749-8345. Don't forget to leave your name and phone number. For those who prefer to communicate through a modem, why not log on to Houston Public Television's Computer Information Service. Dial 713-749-8371. Then select the option for Computer Workshop Forum. For a copy of this show, send a check or money order for $29.95 to Computer Workshop, KUHT TV, 4513 Cullen Boulevard, Houston, Texas, 77004. Ask for show number 103.